Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. We are back with round 4 from the Nottingham League Challenge at Chimera Games. Remember that this is the weekend where Lysandre's trump card was first banned, so we're in the format boundaries cross 2 roaring skies, but with Lysandre's trump card banned. And for round 4, ladies and gentlemen, I have an absolute doozy for you. We have once again welcomed back Benjamin Pham, the reigning Dutch national champion. He is going to be playing his fighting bats deck. And we welcome to the stream for the first time, I think the first time I've ever commentated one of his games, lovely chap Geoffrey Toulmin, who is going to be playing a Hippowdon deck. Yeah, it's awesome. You need to see this bad boy in action. So, I hope you enjoy this game very much indeed. Make sure, of course, that you've checked out rounds 1, 2 and 3 before you check out this game, so that it all makes sense and stuff I'm referring back to makes sense to you. And, of course, make sure you like, subscribe, and all that good stuff at the end of the video. You know the drill by then. Sit back and enjoy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we have Benjamin Pham on the left. You might remember him from our round 3 matchup where he was playing his fighting bats deck, and on the right we have the lovely Geoffrey Toulmin, a guy who I don't believe that I have had the pleasure of having on stream before, but the good news is we've got him on stream now. He's not a player that I'm as aware of has got his Worlds invite already sewn up. He plays a lot for his children, considered a poker dad, but let me make this very clear, ladies and gentlemen, he is a very, very good player. That's how he has ended up 3-0 coming into round 4 with a very, very unusual deck. And you know it is an unusual deck because he's got a Hippowdon on the bench. But we'll get to him in a minute. As always, I would highly recommend, if you haven't watched round 3, to go back and watch round 3 first so that you can talk all about Benji's deck, and you can hear me kind of talk about that and get into it in a fair bit of detail. So I would highly recommend going back and watching round 3 if you haven't done so before. Now, Benji's got 2 Zubats out, and as we saw, because he started with 1, he's just played a repeat ball to get a second. As we saw in the previous round, Benji's deck becomes infinitely better if he can get a whole bunch of Zubats out and start streaming them. Remember that when he evolves Zubat up to Golbat, he gets to put 2 damage counters on the field, and then when he, to one of Jeff's Pokemon, and then when he gets a Crobat out, he gets to do another 3 to anyone on the field. So it starts to let it add up nice and quickly. Now, he has just used a Corinna for an Ultra Ball and a Landorus, and presumably he hasn't played a, he's struggling for cards here a little bit, so presumably he's going to play the Ultra Ball to get a Shaman. Now, he could go after something like a Hawlucha to start fighting down that Seismitoad, but I would imagine him going for a Shaman here, try and get some more cards on the field. Yes, and he has gone for the Shaman, as I suspected. Now, the thing about Seismitoad here is that he's going to be able to stop Benji's trainers. Remember, he's got that Quaking Punch attack that does 30 damage and stops trainers. So Jeff could well have Trainer Lock going as early as next turn. Benji has essentially got a single turn to use his trainers, get some stuff rolling, and then to actually get something going, because he could well be Trainer Locked as early as next turn. So Benji's put the energy on Landorus, that's going to help. It also, it gets a card out of his hand, so it was worth it to, draw an extra card with Shaman. And he plays a VS Seeker now for Corinna. Now, I'm not usually a huge fan of playing VS Seeker before you need it. If Benji were to be end here, he's basically just wasted a VS Seeker. I mean, he's used it to get a Corinna, but he could have used it for another card he wants more later. And we see the double colourless going down there, which means Jeff will be Quaking Punching this turn. It is a huge advantage to, play VS Seeker if you think you're going to get Trainer Locked, because otherwise it could end up being useless. So Jeff is going here, and he's getting a second Hippowdon. More on Hippowdon and Hippowdon in a moment. And he's got the DC on Seismitoad. Now, he really wants, and we see a Sycamore there, so he's going to get another 7 cards. He wants a Muscle Band here. A Muscle Band would get a 1-hit KO on the 40 HP Zubat. He's not going to do it with just 30 damage from the Quaking Punch, and I'm fairly sure he doesn't play lasers. But we do see a Trainer's Mail there, which will allow him to look at the top 4 cards and pick any trainer he likes from those cards and put them into his hand. And he plays that Trainer's Mail right away. He's digging for that Muscle Band, I imagine. He wants to get the Muscle Band to get the KO on the Zubat. Now, when he gets a Silent Lab instead, which is a very interesting card, it stops abilities from all basic Pokemon, which means Benji is not going to be able to use his Jirachi or his second Shaman next turn. Oh, and there's the Muscle Band for the KO. But he will still be able to use Golbat's or Crobat's abilities. Now, one thing which is absolutely crucial here is that as well as getting a prize there, Geoff has stopped that Zubat going into a Crobat, and that means that he's not going to be taking 2 damage counters from that Crobat. Now, don't get me wrong, from Golbat, sorry. I always get them confused. You will have to forgive me. Now, oh, and Lysandre comes down for the Hippotas, and some people might wonder why he's actually gone for the Hippotas there rather than facing down the Seismitoad. And there's 2 reasons. First of all, if Seismitoad doesn't come back into the active, then there is not going to be a trainer lock next turn, and Benji will get his trainers back. But also, the Hippowdon is a big problem because it blocks attacks from EXs. Now, the Hippotas itself has 90 HP, so doing 50 is good, but it's going to take another one of them to get the KO. And there's a really nice escape rope there from Geoff, and Benji has to just put a Hawlucha active. He doesn't want to put the Hawlucha active, but the good news is that with Geoff not playing lasers, the maximum amount of damage he's going to be able to do here is 50 damage, and the Hawlucha does have 70 HP, so it will survive. It will be very almost dead, but it will survive. So the other, and you saw Geoff trying to evolve the turn, he put the Hippotas down. It's very easily done. I played Geoff later on in the day and tried to attach 2 energy in 1 turn, so it's very easily done, especially when I've made you be on stream like a terrible person. The only other options from that escape rope with Benji were putting up a Zubat, which would have got KO straight away, or a Shaman, and you don't want to put 110 HP EX into the active at any point. So Geoff, now that escape rope has gone brilliantly for him. He's gone and got himself a Seismitoad back into the active, and he's now playing a Korrina for a VS Seeker. Not exactly the play he wanted, because he's essentially playing a Korrina to get something going next turn, but it's better than nothing. And he has also got the Hippowdon from that. Now, Hippowdon I haven't actually got round to mentioning yet. Hippowdon's got 2 attacks. One of them, one for a fighting energy and a double colourless, and one for 2 fighting energy and a double colourless. And Benji here, now the good news for him is that Hawlucha for 1 energy does 60 to an EX, and he can 2-hit KO that Seismitoad, but he's going to die very quickly. So what he's going to have to do is, as you see here, he's using the Korrina he played last turn, and he's now getting a Hawlucha and a VS Seeker, but of course he can't play that VS Seeker because he is trainer locked. Now, going back to Hippowdon, its first attack for free energy does 60 damage and reads, during your opponent's next turn, prevent all effective attacks, including damage, done to this Pokemon by Pokemon EX. Its second attack for 100 damage is for 2 fighting and a double colourless, and it does, like I say, 120 to itself. Now, crucially, if we look at Benji's deck and we look at the attackers, he's got Landorus, which can't hit Hippowdon. He's got Hawlucha, whose attack only hits the X's. And then he's got Crobat, which maxes out at 30 damage, 50 with a muscle band, and Hippowdon's got 130 HP. Now, don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen. You know, Crobat's also got a resistance to fighting. And, you know, it can do 50, and of course you've got the extra damage from evolving into Golbat and Crobat. So Benji can take down the Hippowdons using bats, but it takes an awful lot of effort to do so. And what we saw there was a land judgment for the KO on the Seismitoad, which is good, but it means he's got no energy left on that Landorus. Now he's got the Hippowdon into the active, he's using a Teammates here, which is an excellent card, and he's gone for a Muscle Band and a Strong Energy. So Resistance Desert, the first attack here, is actually not going to do 60 damage, it's going to do 100, given that he adds to it with Strong Energy for 20 and Muscle Band for 20. And that, of course, is crucial, because with Landorus having 180 HP, he's now 2-hit KOing the Landorus rather than 3-hit KOing, as he would have been just doing 60 damage per turn. And that means that next turn, Benji cannot damage that Hippowdon with any non-EX Pokemon. With any EX Pokemon. And the only non-EXs he plays are Hawlucha, whose attack cannot hit non-EX Pokemon, it can only hit EXs, and the Golbat and Crobat. But these Bats decks, they like to get the 20 damage or the 2 damage counters when you evolve to Golbat, and then another 3 damage counters when you evolve into Crobat. That means that he doesn't play any rare candy, which means the best he can do this turn is a Golbat, which for 1 energy does 10 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon. And then will promptly get KO'd by the Hippowdon, which will be doing 80 once you take away the resistance. One bonus that Benji has got, if he can get all those bats out, is that all the bats have resistance to fighting, as does Shaman, but you really don't want the Shaman in the active, because it would only take 20 more damage, 1 more strong energy, or indeed a fighting stadium. And Jeff is able to get the 1-hit KO with the Hippowdon. Now, interestingly enough, Hawlucha's ability is turned off by Silent Lab at the moment, meaning it does hit for weakness and resistance, but nothing on Jeff's side of the field has weakness or resistance. It's kind of irrelevant. It's there to screw up the Shaman math, to be honest with you. So, there goes a Lysandre, and now if he had... Now, the interesting play here is that he's not getting a KO. If he pulled up... Oh, he is getting a KO because he's got the strong energy as well, which means that this Hammerhead is going to do 70 to the active, 30 to the bench. So he's getting the KO on the active Hippotas, and now it does do 30 to the Hippowdon. It reads, during your opponent's next turn, prevent all effective attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon by Pokemon EX. Now, as soon as a Pokemon goes to the bench, it is now treated as a different Pokemon. It's only the same Pokemon while it's in the active. So they did do the correct thing there. The Hippowdon did take the 30 damage on the bench. It was absolutely, that was the correct ruling. It's counted as a different Pokemon when it goes to the bench. So even if your opponent was to play a Lysandre and you were to come straight back into the active, it's a different Pokemon. Now, of course, Jeff doesn't mind too much because he's now evened up the game by KOing with Resistance Desert, that doing another 100 damage, KOing the Landorus EX, and now Benji, and he's got a similar kind of thing to we saw in his previous game against Luke, which you should have watched by now. In the previous game, he was really struggling to get the KO against Rayquaza, and here he's struggling to get the KO against Hippowdon. He needs to do 130 damage, and it's, he's doing, like I say, if he gets a Crobat out, he can be doing 50 damage with a muscle band for a single energy. But then, even that would take 2 more hits. Now, if he could get a Golbat and put 20 damage down, and then he could get a Crobat and put 30 damage down, and then he could do 50 damage with a muscle banded Crobat with Skill Dive, that would be enough to get the KO on the Hippowdon. But of course, that's not happening this turn. So, it takes a lot. So we see the Korrina coming down here, we see him getting an Ultra Ball for a Golbat, and he's going to be able to do 20 damage somewhere. And he pretty much has to hit the active here and hope that he's able to KO the one on the bench. Now, one option he would have here would be using a Landorus and actually trying to pick off the Hippotas on the bench, because although the active Hippowdon is blocking damage from EXs, it's not like Safeguard that you would find on a Sigilif or a Suicune, which just always blocks attacks from EXs. It's only the active Hippowdon if it used Resistance Desert the previous turn. Now, we do see the Ultra Ball coming down here from Jeff, and presumably, yes, it is going to be for a Hippowdon, because the other thing is we haven't seen an energy drop for a couple of turns. So what Jeff really wants to do here is get the Hippowdon up and hopefully attach an energy, because, although Benji's struggling for attackers, sooner or later you've got to imagine that the Hippowdon is probably going to get KO'd. Oh, and there goes a Lysandre, and that's an excellent play from Jeff there, because he could have just got the KO on the Hawlucha, and that would have been fine, but then, that Crobat could have come out and actually got the KO next turn, because if Benji had a Crobat, he could have done 30 damage from the ability, then done 50 damage with a muscle-banded skill dive, and that actually would have got the KO on that Hippowdon and knocked all of Jeff's energy off the field. Now, it was a slim chance of that happening, but there was a scenario in which Jeff gets a KO, and he's drawing with Shaman, and of course there's a fighting stadium down now. That Silent Lab has gone, so the good news is that Benji is able to draw with Shaman, although Silent Lab is not a hugely played card, so mistakes can be made. But the problem is we struggle to see what's going to happen here. That Landorus now can start picking off the benched Hippowdon, but it's going to take 3 turns to pick off the benched Hippowdon, and it's going to take 2 turns for the active Hippowdon, or Hippowdon, or however you want to pronounce it, to KO that Landorus and end the game. The other thing which we've got to bear in mind here is that now with 1 more energy, Jeff could do Double Edge, which does 100 damage, but would then go up to 140 with the Muscle Band and the Strong Energy, and he would be able to KO a Bent Shaman. So if he's got an Energy Lysandre, he would be able to end the game. And that was an argument, and he has the energy, so there is an argument here, and it would have been a risky play, so I don't know if I'd have done it, but one option that Jeff had was to just KO the active Hawlucha last turn, and then if Benji didn't have the Crobat Muscle Band energy combo, then he actually would have been able to just Lysandre and kill the Shaman, and he'd have the win this turn. I don't think that was a smart play, just so we're clear. I'm saying it was an option, but unless Benji can hit a super scoop up here or get the Landorus out of the active, Jeff is going to win the game next turn anyway. So he went for the conservative route, and it probably was the best route to go for. But as I've said, he could have saved the Lysandre, he could have hit the active Hawlucha for the KO, and then won the game the next turn with an energy Lysandre. It would have been a less risky play if he'd had an energy on the Hippowdon on the bench. One of the reasons I couldn't really go for that play is because, like I say, Crobat Energy Muscle Band would have got the KO on Jeff's Hippowdon, and Jeff then would have had no energy on the field whatsoever. So certainly it was an option, but it's not what I would have gone for. I just like to point out other little plays, things that people can do to advance their balls. They will take other routes through the game. Now, he has now gone for a Corinna for a scoop-up Cyclone, which he's got to play, and he's got to pick up the Landorus, because if he doesn't pick up the Landorus, that Hippowdon's going to kill it and get the KO next turn. Now, what Benji can do here is he can just put down the energy again, and he can put down the Focus Sash again, and then he can hit the benched Hippowdon, but he's not really getting anywhere here, because he needs to KO the active Hippowdon. What he really, really needs is he still needs a Crobat. He needs to get... Now, it's going to be hella difficult to do. But if he can get a Golbat next turn and put 20 damage on the benched Hippowdon, that will actually get the KO. Then the following turn, he can do what we were suggesting before, and then get... and there's just a Lysandre for the game anyway. Although we would need another energy, I believe. I believe at the moment he's only hitting for 90 given the resistance. No, he's not. He is getting the KO because there's a fighting stadium in play. So he's actually got the KO because of the fighting stadium anyway. It would have done... No, I'm lying to you. Because the first attack with 1 strong energy, 1 muscle band, 1 fighting stadium goes up to 120 and down to 100 with resistance. But it's a moot point anyway. So what I was saying that last turn was that Benji could potentially have got a Golbat, use the ability for 20 to KO the benched Hippowdon, and then the following turn tried to get a Crobat, doing 30 damage with the ability and 50 with a muscle banded skill dive for the KO. It's a long shot, and that's what we saw in that game. Benji is just once those Hippowdons come out, it's so difficult for Benji to actually KO them. He can get some bench damage in with Landorus as we saw that game, and he needs to do so. He can use the Crobat and the Golbat to spread some damage counters around, and I really do think that if the game goes like last time, Benji really needs to try and get a Crobat down, because there have been situations this game where Benji's actually been able to potentially get KOs if he can get a Crobat out. Now, as we're between games, I would of course like to thank the lovely people at Chimera Games in Nottingham, mostly Beck, Amanda and Andy, because they really have been superb in firstly running an awesome tournament. Andy Leach, I should say, running an awesome tournament, but also being nice enough to let me set up this camera and record games. I was actually playing in this tournament, and they were allowing me to set up a camera, start games recording kind of as I was playing in the tournament as well. So huge thanks to those people. So going into game 2, and Benji's going to go first again, and it really comes down to setup. The big advantage Benji's got is that, you know, if he can start getting some Golbats and Crobats out, and he's got 2 Zubats right away, which is a very good start, and get going, then he is going to potentially be able to, Fighting Stadium down straight away, you know, start taking out some of those Hippotasses nice and early. Although I should point out the Hippotas still has 90 HP, so it's not the easiest to kill Pokemon ever. The advantage he's got, that's an interesting one. Scoop up Cyclone after the Shaman to draw more cards with said Shaman. He wants to be going... It's an awkward thing for Benji here, because on the one hand, he wants to go for an early Landorus. Early Landorus starts spreading damage around the Hippotasses, because he's not really worried about Seismitoad. Hawlucha can take care of Seismitoad without Laser and just not playing Laser. Seismitoad can't one-hit KO Hawlucha. Hawlucha can two-hit KO Seismitoad. So Benji's really not worried about Seismitoad here. And that's a terrible start from Jeff. He attaches a strong energy and then just passes. But the advantage Benji's got is that Jeff, to win this game, needs Hippowdon. It's a stage 1, it needs 2 energy attachments, and one of them has to be a DCE. And finally, a heads-on Super Scoop Up for Benji. I don't know if he hit one last game, I certainly remember him missing a couple. There goes the Golbat, 20 damage to the benched Hippowdon, of course it's got to be, and then he's going to want to be getting a Landorus going this turn. Remember that Golbat has free retreat. So he's going to want to be getting an energy on Landorus and starting to hit both the Hippotasses. He's going to be going, oh no, he's gone for the Landorus straight away. And there is a chance he can get the KO here with a strong energy and a muscle band. He will be doing 70 damage with Landorus's Hammerhead and will actually get the KO on that Hippotas, meaning that Jeff will then be 2 turns away from getting a Hippowdon out. Although he could at that point transition into Seismitoad. Seismitoad, remember, hits Landorus for weakness and blocks trainers, and Landorus with a retreat cost of I think 3 takes a long time to get out the active. And this game is going very well for Benji. Now he still needs a strong energy muscle band, but if he can stop Jeff in his tracks here, this is going to be huge. Now the alternative is if Benji gets the Landorus up and doesn't get the KO, and then Jeff goes Hippowdon double colourless, then the Landorus is stuck in the active and he can't hit the Hippowdon because Hippowdon's using his attack. So Jeff is going to need to draw into something next turn, because if the game goes like this for much longer, and Benji's still got no energy. 2 turns in and no energy. So although Jeff had a very bad turn 1, Benji isn't really doing a huge amount better. We see another strong energy there, and we see the Hippowdon coming out, but we see no attack there because Hippowdon can only hit for a minimum of a fighting double colourless. And this gives Benji a huge turn here to maybe get a Crobat going, and he finally gets the Professor's Letter to get a fighting energy. If he's got a Crobat, I would be a fan here of actually attacking with the Crobat rather than the Landorus, although the Landorus hits the Hippowdon and the benched Hippotas, and as we saw in the previous game, if Jeff's able to start streaming these Hippowdons, I've never said Hippowdons so often as I have in this video, if Jeff's able to stream the Hippowdons, Benji really is going to struggle to finish this game out. So the Corinna comes down, and Benji here, I would like to see him go for an Ultra Ball for a Crobat. And there goes the Ultra Ball for the Crobat. And I mean, fighting Pokemon here, I'd like to see him go for a Hawlucha, purely because at the moment Jeff's going Hippowdon, but if Benji can take down the Hippowdons, especially if he starts going Landorus, then all of a sudden Seismitoad becomes Jeff's kind of primary attacker, and Hawlucha deals with Seismitoad quickly. The last thing that Benji wants is for Jeff to be going full on Seismitoad, and it's much harder to get a Hawlucha out under Trainer Lock. So it looks like that's what Benji's gone for, and I agree here. This is the exact play I would have gone for. Although he might just be Ultra Ball in the Hawlucha. But I would like, if I were Benji, I'd like to have a Hawlucha on the bench here. He's getting rid of a fighting stadium, he doesn't need that, and just a second Corinna. But I like to have a Hawlucha on the bench just because there is a situation here where Jeff is able to just go Seismitoad, and Seismitoad kills Zubats easily. A Muscle Banded Seismitoad 2 hits KO's Landorus, and if you don't have a Hawlucha on the bench and you get put under Trainer Lock, it can be very difficult to actually get anywhere. And he is going for the attack with Crobat. I'm a huge fan of this play. I'd love to see a Muscle Band, because if he can go Muscle Band here... Oh, no, it's not going to... No, I'm lying to you. It's not going to make any difference. It might make a difference next turn, but not for now. I would like to have seen him bench the Hawlucha, I'm going to be honest with you, because if he benches a Hawlucha, then it means if Jeff does go Seismitoad, Benji's got a counter ready to go. If Benji were to go Seismitoad N, and we've seen that, Jeff, and we've seen that Jeff does play N, if Jeff goes full on Seismitoad, Benji's deck, it's not amazing, but it is vulnerable to a Seismitoad if he can't get a Hawlucha out. Because neither Bats nor Landorus are great attackers against Seismitoad. Now, you see Hippowdon there, he hit for 80, the 2 strong energy puts it up to 100, but remember that Crobat has resistance, so it goes back down to 80. And we see a Super Scoop Up, and it's a Heads. Now here, he's saving a KO, and he's going to be able to go straight for the Golbat, putting another 20 damage down. Now, if he's got a Muscle Band here, there's an awesome play. Hippowdon has 130 HP. So Crobat here does 20 damage, puts him on 100. If he goes Energy Muscle Band, then Skill Dive does 10 to all of your opponent's Pokemon. With a Muscle Band, of course, it does 30 to the active, and would get the KO on the Hippowdon. Or, of course, he can do that, which was the other play I was going to mention, whereby now... the Hippowdon's not in the active, so it's no longer counted as the same Pokemon. So it gets KO'd from the 30 residual bench damage, and the active gets 30 damage and dies. And there's going to be no Resistance Desert coming next turn, because Jeff needs 2 energy cards to do so. At this stage, Jeff either needs to go Seismitoad, or I believe he needs to scoop the game. And the reason is, we saw him win game 1, and we see here that... And we see in this situation that Jeff, I don't see him winning game 2 here. Now, and I don't think it depends what he's actually got. I'm not a fan of the Landorus play because Benji can Landorus the Landorus. And, Benji can use Crobat, which is resistant to the Landorus. Whereas Seismitoad hits Benji's Landorus for weakness. And... now, here's of course the other thing. Apparently that was Jeff's entire hand, so I can understand why he didn't go for the Seismitoad. Now, I did say about Jeff scooping, but a bit of background. We're in round 4. I'm moderately certain that Jeff won the first 3 rounds. That puts Jeff at 3-0 here in a 5-round tournament. Now, it's a league challenge, so it depends what Jeff's going for. If he's going for, I want to get top 4 and win a couple of packs and get some championship points and a funky little promo card, then... just play for the draw. Play this game out, let it take as long as it can, and we see a Golbat coming down, putting that Hippowdon onto 80. And that means that with the residual bench damage from Landorus, he could, now if he gets a second Golbat next turn, he's going to be able to KO that benched Hippowdon, because he's only got 20 HP left. However... if he's going for, I want to win this league challenge, because remember at league challenge there's no top cut, there's just a top 4 get extra prizes. In that situation, Jeff needs to scoop to try and get the win. A draw here is fine for Jeff if he wants to just make top 4 in the tournament, but if he wants to win the tournament, and there's a KO on that, Landorus comes active, and this game is not going to take very much. Oh, and he can actually land Judgment for the win this turn. So there we go. It is now 1 game each. Now, so yeah, it all comes down to what you want. If you're 3-0 in a 5-round tournament, then you can basically draw the last 2 rounds, and then you're going to make top 4. Now, if you're going to top cut, then draws are good. In a league challenge, you got to ask yourself what you want. Do you want to just get top 4 and get a couple little prizes, couple of packs, promo card? Or do you want to try and win the tournament, which is still a couple packs and a promo card, but glory? Then you scoop game 2 and you go to game 3 to give yourself more time to finish game 3 so that you can actually, you know, have a legitimate game 3 and have a win in the end. Doesn't really matter which one you go for. But again, it's something I like to discuss in the videos. I'm not always going to discuss things that they are doing. Sometimes there's things that these players won't do but other players will. I like to bring those out if you can. Benji here, as I've mentioned in the previous video, he's going for the top 22 in Europe by championship points, and if he gets that, then he will have a paid trip to Boston in August for Worlds, and he will go straight into day 2, not into day 1 with the riffraff. So for Benji here, a win is absolutely crucial in the tournament. So Jeff now gets to go first for the first time, and what he really needs here is he needs to get a Hippowdon down, preferably on the bench with an energy. Double colourless will do nicely. And there's an end straight away, but he had to play the energy because the worst, and we saw that he's missed energy drops in this tournament, in this series, sorry. The worst case scenario for Jeff there would be if he ends up going for the N and then not drawing any energy and missing the energy drop. And we've seen him miss energy drops. So Jeff there, he's got the Hippowdon, he's got the energy. We know the Hippowdon isn't dying next turn because Benji isn't playing lasers. The absolute most he can do with his deck on turn 1 is a Landorus with strong energy muscle band, which will do 70 damage in total. However, this is now starting to look bad for Jeff because Jeff doesn't have another basic. Now, if Benji... Ooh, and we see was that 3 or 4 strong energy and a teammates. This is one of the things I'm not a huge fan of the support of teammates. Yeah, we got a switch, an Ultra Ball, 3 strong energy and a teammates. One of those might have been a strong energy. It's a terrible hand. And with a hand like that, I'm not sure... I mean, Jeff's going to need to top deck something because Benji... I would be surprised if Benji didn't knock out that Hippowdon next turn. And it brings me back to why I'm not a huge fan of Teammates. Teammates is a reactive card. You can't proactively use Teammates. What I mean by that is, Teammates, it's a card which allows you to search for any 2 cards if one of your Pokemon was KO'd the previous turn. Which means if you get it in your hand turn 1 and you haven't had any Pokemon KO'd the previous turn, Teammates is useless. And when I played Speed Don Pham, this was before Roaring Skies, I was a big fan of a speed list with no teammates, and my Don Fan list had an advantage over the other Don Fan lists that played teammates, because I could generally get my Don Fan set up faster and get going faster, and that gave me a really good mirror match. Now, teammates is good in some matchups, not good in others, but in a situation here, if that teammates was a Sycamore or an N, and a Sycamore would be brutal, getting rid of all those strong energy, but that would give Jeff a much, much easier time, whereas as it stands at the moment, that teammate is doing absolutely nothing for him. It is garbage. We see the strong energy come down. Now, there was no damage done by Benji last turn, but it's not going to be all that difficult for him to get the KO. He can do 70 damage with Landorus, and he can do 20 damage each by evolving into Crobats. So a Landorus with 1 of Strong Energy or Muscle Band, and both Crobats, or or a Landorus with both of them and 1 Crobat would get the KO. Now, we saw Jeff trying to get the KO on the Zubat there. He's doing 20 damage for 2 energy. With the strong energy, it goes up to 40. Unfortunately, he missed the resistance on the Zubat. And he didn't get the KO. Now, the reason why he went for the Zubat, I'm imagining, is because he really wanted to get a prize to try and get out of the horrific hand he's got. Unfortunately, he missed the weakness and he didn't get the KO. Hippotas does have an attack tackle for 20 damage for 1 double colourless. Now, he's going to go for a Crobat here, a Golbat here to do 20 damage through the ability. Oh no, he's going for a Shaman to draw more cards. That is also an appropriate thing to do, especially as that might be his entire hand. I can't see anything else. So it looks like he's going to Shaman for 6. Oh no, he has got a bit of a hand, sorry. There goes Fighting Stadium. Oh, he already had the Golbat in hand, and now he gets to Shaman for 6 cards. And again, he needs either a Strong Energy Muscle Band or an Energy Muscle Band Golbat, and that will win the game. There goes the Golbat. So an Energy Muscle Band or a Strong Energy, and he's got the KO by doing 50 with the Landorus. It doesn't seem like he's got any energy though, else he would have put it down by now. So he retreats into the Hawlucha and just has to pass. He gives Jeff 1 more turn. Now it looks like he's got a Pokemon Center Lady in hand. That heals 60 damage and removes any special conditions. Now, Hippotas does have an attack for 2 fighting and a colourless rolling tackle, which does 50 damage, which actually here is going to go up to 90 with the 2 strong energy and KO, except it won't KO because Benji deliberately put one that had a Focus Sash. Focus Sash, remember, is a tool where if you would be 1-hit KO'd, you discard Focus Sash and go down to 10 HP. Benji has still not got an attack off. And here, now he's got the Muscle Band, he's doing 50, he would need both Crobats to get a KO here, which I think is probably asking a little bit too much. So Benji is not having a great start to this game, and it's got to be frustrating for Jeff here. Because if Jeff had a half-decent start here, if he just got some stuff going, he would be sitting there using Hippowdon to do 60 or more damage turn after turn after turn, and it would be a beautiful thing to behold. Now we finally see a Colress coming down for 5, and although he's now put too much energy on that Hippotas, that was essentially a desperation play of I have really got to get something going here. If I hit a Hippowdon here, I can do the attack, and then your Landorus is stuck in the active unless you can hit a switch. And by attaching the strong energy, he's got 1 less card in his deck, which slightly raises the odds of him hitting anything from this. Of course, it is his at least 4th turn of the game, so now he's finally got something going. A Hippotas goes on the bench, and an Ultra Ball comes down for a Hippowdon. But again, we're back in that same situation where Benji needs a Crobat energy, and he can use the ability to do 30 damage. He can then Muscle Band and energy to do Skill Dive for 50 and KO the Hippowdon. And I hope he does do that at some point, because I've pointed out that play time and time again, and he never actually does it. The other option, of course, is that he could get out 2 Crobats, use 2 kinds of abilities, and then just get a KO with Skill Dive without a Muscle Band. Or indeed do what he's done before, use 2 Crobats, Lysandre the benched Hippotas, and then KO the Hippowdon with the residual 30 bench damage. So here, always interestingly enough, he's gone for the KO. Now remember the Hippowdon, the second attack does 100 damage and 20 to you. If you add in 3 strong energy and the Fighting Stadium, you actually go up to 120. What I don't like so much is that now he's got 70 damage, which means that it's essentially removed the need for Benji to get a Muscle Band. If Benji's got a Crobat energy, he is then going to be able to use the ability and then attach an energy and Skill Dive for the KO. Or indeed, just do this. I really want him to get the KO, but it's clearly not happening. He's not going to do it with that. Yes, and sorry, I was just working out the maths there in my head. Now the Hippowdon, ooh, things just got mighty interesting. Now essentially what's happened there is that Benji has just hit for 50, put in Hippowdon on 120. What that means is Jeff can do the same attack he just did. He can do 180 damage and he can KO the Landorus. But he is going to do 20 damage to himself and he is going to be KO'd as well. Now, the other option is to not get the KO on the Landorus, but that's a silly play. I would not go for that, because if Benji's got a Crobat, he's going to be able to use Crobat's ability to do 30 damage or 3 damage counters to Hippowdon and get the KO anyway. So, I don't agree with this play, I'm afraid. Because if I'm Jeff, I'm basically thinking, look, if I do the attack, I'm getting KO'd. If I don't do the attack, all he needs is a Crobat, and I'm getting KO'd. I would go by the I'm getting KO'd either way. Take the 2 prizes. You've still got a Hippowdon with 100 HP left. You've taken out... Oh, and it's actually worked out very well for him. So, it's worked out quite nicely. The reason I would have gone for the KO is essentially most Landorus Bats players only play 2 Landorus. We see 1 Landorus down. Now, if he gets a KO with the Hippowdon the previous turn, we see here he's got a second Hippowdon ready to go. And it would have 100 HP left. And Benji is essentially down to Horluchas that can't attack, and Crobats and Shamans that only do 30 damage each. So if I was... Now, if he gets a Pokemon Center Lady off this, that would be awesome. No, I don't know why he's not going for the KO on the Landorus here. Okay, so what he's done there is he's pulled up the Golbat with Lysandre. He's actually doing 100 damage, or reduced to 80 with the resistance. So he's got enough to KO the Golbat, and he still gets to use the attack. But see here, now, this is what I was worried about happening. Now he's going to get the Crobat, and Jeff's been so protective of the Hippowdon. The Hippowdon's now going to die from Crobat's ability. And actually, this could be game for Benji here. Because that Hippowdon on the... Oh, and he's just going to pull it up and KO it with the residual bench damage. And yeah, now he's doing 70 damage, which is going to get the KO on both of them and actually end the game for Benji, despite only having taken 2 prizes. So a very interesting game there, a very entertaining one. I disagree with Lysandre on that previous turn. I'm going to be honest with you. I think if he'd have just killed the Landorus, I think a couple of turns ago, if he'd have killed the Landorus, taken the KO from bench damage, he's then left with a benched Hippowdon, which has got 100 HP left, and Benji's going to struggle to kill that. He can then use that to take the last couple of prizes. So I think there might have been a way for Jeff to win that, but we don't know how it would have worked out. So we can never say that would have been, but that's the play I personally would have gone for. But thank you to both of those chaps. A wonderful game, a really interesting game, and a huge thanks to Jeff for agreeing to be on stream with what is a very, very interesting, very, very original deck. I appreciate that greatly. Make sure you check out my other videos. Make sure you like, subscribe, get a friend to subscribe if you haven't done so already, and check out my new video game related channel, Wassy Plays, which can be found in the featured tabs on the right hand side of your screen. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.